Order. Good afternoon. I am happy to call this hearing to order, and we're pleased to be able to hear from the Administrator today. Welcome to the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee hearing with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Our witness today is the NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. I thank you for being here in these difficult times. I can almost see you across this room, but we are delighted that you are with us here in the old Senate Russell building in this historic room. Before we get into details, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge last week's dedication of a presidential memorial to President Eisenhower. It occurred here in Washington, D.C. It was dedicated last Thursday, and it was President Eisenhower that made a recommendation in 1958 for the nation's space agency to be a civilian-based entity. Congress responded by taking activities of the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics and transforming them into NASA. So I pay tribute to this native Kansan and appreciate the decision that was made then. Since that time, since 1958, NASA has become known around the world as the leader in innovation and exploration, inspiring generations of engineers, developers, and explorers. And I want to commend you, Administrator Bridenstine, Vice President Pence, and the Trump administration for continuing that inspiration with bold visions, historic accomplishments, and focus on returning astronauts to the moon with the Artemis program. On Monday, NASA released their Lunar Exploration Program overview, which integrates the elements needed to return our astronauts to the surface of the moon with the science goals we hope to achieve. I look forward to that announcement being discussed, learning more details, and I'm glad you're here, and the timing that your presence here lends importance to this hearing. I plan on today's hearing being the first in an ongoing dialogue with NASA and others to explore the Artemis program and the impact it will have on our country. It goes without saying the impact the Apollo program had on our nation, and we continue to reap benefits of those missions, and I anticipate that Artemis will do the same for years to come. Much like Apollo, Artemis has the potential to influence our daily lives, from the advancements in science and technology to inspire the next generation of leaders. Fiscal year 2021 budget request for NASA contains a total of $12 billion associated with the Artemis program efforts toward landing astronauts on the moon in 2024. This plan includes the building and testing of rockets, capsules, and the development of lunar landers that will deliver a crew to the surface of the moon. I'm excited about the potential of the first woman being on the moon. However, our world has changed significantly and has been significantly altered since the initial release of the budget, and I look forward to discussing how NASA is adapting our new and unprecedented environment while pushing forward with Artemis. Although we face many challenges, including COVID, I'm interested in hearing your testimony today and discussing the value of the Artemis program and what it will bring to our nation and to the world. These are unique times, and I look forward to hearing how NASA is planning to address them. And I again thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being with us here today. I now recognize the ranking member of our subcommittee, Senator Shaheen, for her opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Moran, and thank you to Administrator Bridenstine for being here this afternoon. I have a little longer statement than usual as an opening, and while I would echo your positive comments about former President Eisenhower and his commitment to the space program and making sure that was a civilian agency, I want to express my concerns about where we are with respect to the appropriations process, Mr. Chairman. Next week is the end of the fiscal year. You and I worked together on a bipartisan bill. We had that ready to move forward in June, but when the fiscal year ends, the Senate Appropriations Committee will not have held one single markup. No bills will have been reported to the Senate. We've already gone 4 months, more than 4 months, since the House sent us the HEROES Act without really addressing the needs of Americans who are suffering from this pandemic and the economic consequences of COVID-19. We have so many who have lost jobs that are directly linked to the inaction of this government and delays in the Senate. For example, in 2 weeks, the State Department will eliminate nearly 200 jobs from the National Passport Center in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And these cuts are the result of lost revenue from fees during the COVID-19 epidemic. And yet the administration and Majority Leader McConnell refuse to move forward with any comprehensive legislation that can help restore these jobs and others. So I think we should finish the continuing resolution. Obviously, all of us want to keep this government open, but we should also have enough capacity to work together to pass a comprehensive bipartisan COVID relief package. I think that is long overdue. We should have done it before we left in August. We should do it before we leave for the election. Now, turning to the subject of today's hearing, the last time I was with the administrator was a virtual roundtable that we held to help small businesses in New Hampshire take part in NASA's programs. And as I said to you, Administrator, I very much appreciated your willingness to join us on that, and we had a lot of enthusiasm and support from small businesses in the state who I hope will continue to be able to work with NASA. We heard on that Zoom some of the excitement of the shared vision of returning humans to the moon, and I was really pleased to hear that. I've heard a lot of excitement among young people in particular about that. But of course, we know that NASA needs to be about more than just a single moonshot, that it should also support science that teaches us about the Earth, our solar system, the sun, and the universe. NASA should develop technologies that further not just human exploration, but also NASA's other important missions. And most of all, NASA should inspire and teach students. However, while the budget before us includes a generous 12% increase, it's focused on achieving 1 moon landing by 2024. In order to do so, it proposes to eliminate NASA's Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math engagement program. It also cuts NASA's Next Generation Transportation Systems and Science, canceling, among other projects, a telescope that NASA had renamed earlier this year to honor pioneering scientist Nancy Grace Roman. And what, to me, is so frustrating is that these proposals aren't new. Congress, on a bipartisan basis, has rejected these efforts to cut science programs in NASA for the last 3 years. The administration's ambitious plans to return to the moon rely on having a technically literate science and engineering workforce. That's why I believe that this committee is not going to eliminate NASA education programs. The New Hampshire Space Grant is inspiring a love of science in K-12 students and helping support undergraduates and graduate students through scholarships, fellowships, and internships. Research grants and education programs like Space Grant and EPSCoR help make every state a space state. New Hampshire, I'm pleased to say, is a space state since the first American in space, Alan Shepard, who came from New Hampshire, and of course our teacher in space, Krista McAuliffe, who died tragically in the Challenger accident, to today's New Hampshire companies and universities who supply NASA with technology to improve both low orbit and deep space exploration and design, build and operate major instruments on NASA satellites to study solar physics, the moon, and the Earth. I look forward to working with you, Chairman Moran, and to ensure that we can pursue sending humans to the moon and Mars without sacrificing other important NASA missions. Again, Administrator Bridenstine, thank you for being here today.
Senator Shaheen, thank you for your opening statement, and I would indicate to you and to others that it is a privilege to be able to work with you on this subcommittee and many other things in the United States Senate. And I certainly share your views in regard to getting us out of a continuing resolution and completing our work on 12 appropriation bills. You're right. You and I have attempted we have actively pursued that goal in the past and continue to do so this year. We are in a circumstance in which the CR is now necessary. I've indicated so many times I'm never voting for a CR again, but then the alternative becomes shutting down government, and that's a worse alternative. So, Senator Sheen, I pledge to you, I've indicated to those who ask me about our work on this subcommittee and the Appropriations Committee, I'm convinced that you and I can present with the work of our committee members on this subcommittee a CJS committee report, a subcommittee report that would be accepted nearly unanimously by our colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, and would receive broad support on the Senate floor. We have the capability of delivering that product. We just need to be given the opportunity to do so. And I'm certainly interested in seeing that we take the necessary steps to meet the needs of those who continue to suffer both from a health perspective and from an economic perspective from the consequences of COVID-19. I appreciate you pointing out the importance of us as a committee doing our work, the importance of the Senate, the Congress, and the White House reaching agreements so that we can complete 12 appropriation bills in an appropriate way. I now recognize Administrator Bridenstine for his testimony, and then we'll have a round of questions and answers thereafter. Administrator Bridenstine, thank you very much. Thank you for joining Senator Shaheen and I and other members of the subcommittee, and we look forward to your testimony.
Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Shaheen, it's great to be back here at the committee. I know it's been a long time since we, and other members of the committee, it's good to see you. It's been a long time since we've had the ability to get together, and I know we are definitely distanced right now, but I think I feel very safe, and I appreciate having the opportunity to come and testify before the committee. To start, I want to say thank you to everybody in this room for the CARES Act. This was a piece of legislation that was critically important for NASA to be able to continue its missions. I know everybody in the country watched with great interest as we launched American astronauts from American soil for the first time since 2011, just a few short months ago. And of course, we launched the Mars Perseverance rover to Mars, and those things were available to us because of monies that helped us have personal protective equipment, monies that helped us as an agency continue to move forward with the IT requirements to work remotely and do all of those things that are necessary in the COVID era. And without the CARES Act, we would not have been able to we could have probably done the missions, but not nearly as safely as we were able to because of the CARES Act. So number one, thank you. Second of all, the dialogue that I just heard is very important to the NASA workforce. The idea, I think, Chairman Moran, that you said, CRs are not optimum, but they're better than the alternative. On behalf of 70,000 employees at NASA, civil servants and contractors, we wholeheartedly agree with that assessment. And we're grateful for acknowledging that and working to come to a resolution on a CR. I will tell you that when we think about the value that NASA brings to the United States of America, we think about the economic value. I know a lot of people are maybe watching this on C-SPAN or maybe NASA TV or whatever the case is. They're probably watching maybe online. We think about internet broadband from space. We think about satellite television. We think about XM radio. These are all space-based communication capabilities, and this type of capability was born from this little agency called NASA. But it's not just the way we communicate, it's the way we navigate, which has transformed how we live. It's the way we produce food, the way we produce energy, the way we understand climate, the way we predict weather, the way we do national security and defense, and of course, the way we do disaster relief. So the benefit to the United States government from an agency like NASA leading the way, I think, is quite frankly immeasurable. But I will also tell you that the budget that we have before the House and the Senate today is a very strong budget. And I think it is a budget that ultimately enables us to continue to push forward humanity into the solar system in a way that we've never done before. So we think about going to the moon, going sustainably, being able to stay and live and work on another world for long periods of time, using the resources of that world, the hundreds of millions of tons of water ice that were discovered back in 2009 and 2010, using that water ice for life support, and of course, the hydrogen, which is part of that water ice for fuel. These are opportunities that are available to us today that we were not even thinking about back in the 1960s and 1970s. The idea that we're going to use the moon as a proving ground. We learn how to live and work for long periods of time on the surface of another world, and we take all of that knowledge ultimately to Mars. So I think this is a very exciting time at NASA. We think about the Science Mission Directorate at NASA and the value that the Science Mission Directorate is going to receive from the surface of the moon and from orbit around the moon. Heliophysics is a critical component of that. Astrophysics, planetary science, the Gateway, which ultimately is going to enable us to travel with humans all the way to Mars. So I think the budget that is before the House and Senate appropriators right now is a very strong budget. Certainly, like any budget, we have to make difficult decisions when we go through the budget process. But I think that this is a budget that meets the requirements of the decadal surveys, and it's a budget that I think all of America can be very proud of. But of course, as always, we stand ready to work with the lawmakers that appropriate the funds for the agencies like NASA that ultimately need to accomplish the objectives of our country. So with that, Chairman, I will yield back and avail myself to questions.
Administrator, thank you. Let me begin with questions, and we'll make the rounds of our committee members who are participating today. NASA has been challenged with an ambitious goal to return astronauts to the moon 4 years ahead of what was previously planned. It's an ambitious goal, and timelines they serve a purpose. They can spur motivation, as well as a mechanism to incite decisiveness in decision-making. It's a little over a year since the Vice President's announcement of the accelerated timetable. Can you tell the committee why, and the public, why returning to the moon by 2024 is the right goal, and why today is the right time, if that's true?
Yes, sir. So when we think about the history of NASA, we go back to, there's a lot of history, but when we go back to the 1990s, we had the Space Exploration Initiative of the 1990s, and that was a plan to go to the moon and then on to Mars. The problem was that program took too long, and as it takes the longer it takes, the more it costs, and the bills add up, and it got canceled. And then we had, in the early 2000s, we had the Vision for Space Exploration, and that program, of course, again, took too long, it cost too much, and it eventually got canceled. And so this time we said, how do we go to the moon sustainably in a way that's not been done before, so that it is, in fact, we can go to the moon and stay and not have a program that gets canceled? Well, we have a lot of benefits today that we didn't have even in the 1990s. We have international partners. For example, we now, in November, we're celebrating 20 years of American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts and our European partners and our Japanese partners, our Canadian partners, flying, living, and working in space continually for 20 years, which is an amazing accomplishment on the International Space Station. So we have international partners today that want to help us accomplish these missions. We have commercial partners that are driving down costs and increasing access to space, making their own, in many cases, billion-dollar investments into these programs. And so we really believe that with international partnerships, commercial partnerships, the ability to utilize the resources of the moon, and moving with alacrity, again, the faster you go, the less it costs. I know that sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense, but the way budgets work, development programs follow a bell curve. So when you try to have flattened budgets, when a development program follows a bell curve, it actually takes longer and costs more. So we said, look, we need to compress the timeline, we need to go faster, and retire as much risk as possible. And that risk, of course, is to cost and to schedule, and then bringing in our international and commercial partners, driving down costs, increasing access, and moving with alacrity. And I think we've had a lot of success doing that, Mr. Chairman.
Let me raise a topic that was raised earlier by Senator Shaheen. In order to achieve our nation's goals in space, we need a workforce that will rise and meet the future demands. Explain to me the importance of inspiring what I would call the Artemis generation, and then NASA's STEM education programs that have been zeroed out for FY 2021 budget, on the one hand and on the other hand.
Yes, sir. So inspiring the Artemis generation is critically important, and I think there's broad agreement on that. So I'm the first NASA administrator in history that wasn't alive when we had humans living and working on another world. And I think when we go back to the cancellation of programs in the past, and this time wanting, my generation has this clamoring to actually see people living and working on another world, and then taking people onto Mars. And the moon represents that best opportunity to achieve that goal. Regarding the Office of STEM Engagement at NASA, just so we are absolutely clear, education is critical to what we do, and inspiring that next generation to get involved in STEM is necessary for us to achieve the objectives that we've been given. So from that perspective, we are committed to making sure we do that. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Within the Science Mission Directorate, for example, we're very involved in robotics. We call it FIRST Robotics, which is, of course, founded in New Hampshire, for example. So we invest, about $4.5 million every year into FIRST Robotics because there is an absolute direct return on investment for NASA. So if you go out to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory or a lot of the universities that do work for NASA, what you'll find is a lot of those folks, the young people that are doing that work, the brightest minds that we have in this country, a lot of those folks were involved in FIRST Robotics, whether in high school or even before. And so we see a direct return on that. So we think attempting to align as much as possible NASA's mission sets with that education and inspiration effort is the best way to go forward. It is absolutely true, and I want to be clear about this as well. The Office of STEM Engagement is doing, great work. And when we do receive appropriations from the House and the Senate, we move forward on that, and they continue to deliver in a great way for the agency. So it is both. As we go through making budgetary decisions, we look at what is the way to optimize every dollar, and that's how we came to the conclusion we came to. But again, if the Senate appears, sees it a different way, we will follow the law as we have. And right now, OSTEM is doing great work on behalf of the United States of America.
Well, Administrator, thank you for your comments, your response to my questions. I think the Senate will see it a different way as we have in previous years. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe that's the case as well, but I would like to applaud NASA's commitment to FIRST. It's been significant in helping to promote the success of that program, and it's nice to hear that the young people who are excited about STEM as the result of FIRST then take that interest, and many of them are involved with NASA later.
Yes, ma'am.
The Heliophysics Division has been very important in providing data on the inner workings of the sun. Those are valuable not just for their scientific potential, but for the direct consequences that they could have on our space exploration efforts, on our ability to safeguard our satellites, on national security assets, and on other critical infrastructure, including space weather. So NASA's progress in these areas rests on the strength of the Heliophysics Division and the successful implementation of the priorities that have been articulated by the scientific community in the National Academy's Decadal Survey. But last year, Congress appropriated $724.5 million for heliophysics to continue meeting these recommendations. The administration's request for 2021 would cut funding to heliophysics by 13%. What's the suspected impact of these cuts?
Great question. Heliophysics, as you correctly identified, is very important to NASA's missions as well as national security and even commercial operations in space. And so it's important that we make sure that we don't fall behind in that area. Let's see. I think the way to think about this, think about the missions that we have recently launched, even since I've been the NASA administrator. So we had the Parker Solar Probe, which was an amazing capability. It's going to be flying through, it has been flying through the corona of the sun. In other words, through the sun's atmosphere, if you will. We just recently this year launched the Solar Orbiter, which again it's a European Space Agency satellite, but it was launched by the United States of America, launched by NASA, which was a huge part of that effort. We think about the MMS mission, which of course, all of these missions have very important ties to the University of New Hampshire, and I'm well aware of the great work that is being done there for NASA's missions. And there are others that are important. I would say this, Senator Shaheen, as those projects have been launched, what happens is that the amount of dollars necessary to operate to fund them goes down. And as time goes on, if you look, for example, at the out years, look at the year 2022, you'll see the heliophysics budget of NASA not just go down, you'll see it go right back up. So as some projects are coming to a down spending era, we've got other projects that are ramping up. For example, we just recently announced that we're actually going to fly the Hermes mission on the Gateway, which will be in orbit around the moon, which that drives down the cost for heliophysics. We're able to do more heliophysics than ever before. And currently, the University of New Hampshire is involved in 5 other proposals, even right now, that are heliophysics-centric, that are being considered by NASA. But if you look beyond 2021, you'll see the budget goes right back up. We don't have any intent to reduce the amount of capability that we're getting from heliophysics. And I would also say that our goal is to meet the requirements set forth in the DeGatel survey by the National Academy of Sciences, and I'm confident that we are doing that.
Well, I have a follow-up question for that, but I'm going to go on to another topic and come back to that, because NASA's requested $150 million for low Earth orbit commercialization activities, and I appreciate that it's helpful to be able to think about what kinds of commercialization can yield additional funding that can help NASA do its work. But one of the things that I have to say raised my eyebrows was when NASA announced that it will send up to 10 bottles of Estee Lauder Advanced Night Repair Face Cream to the International Space Station so that NASA astronauts can shoot videos of the face cream in the microgravity environment. Now, I'm a fan of Estee Lauder's Advanced Night Repair. So, like anybody else who might want to benefit from its anti-gravity properties. However, I guess I'm having trouble understanding how Estee Lauder's effort is going to support the commercialization efforts of NASA, because as I understand, they're expected to reimburse NASA about $128,000, which is a fraction of what the project will cost. NASA's also sent Adidas soccer balls and Boost shoes to the station. So can you talk about how shooting a cosmetics commercial advances NASA's mission, and what else could we be doing in the time that sending that face cream to space and following up the time that that's taking?
Yes, ma'am. I don't think that shooting a cosmetics commercial is the intent of that particular mission, although that might, I don't know, but that might be something that is added to it. But we reserve about 5% of the International Space Station really for commercial activities, because we do want to have a demand for activities in low Earth orbit that goes beyond just what NASA does. And
I get that. So let me interrupt you for a minute. How was the $128,000 determined as the cost to Estee Lauder for this project?
So I would have to take that for the record and get back to you. I don't know the details on that particular issue, but I can tell you that as an agency, for example, we have flown, Nickelodeon has slime, for example. We have flown slime to the International Space Station. We have used the International Space Station to actually brew beer, for example. And these are all, specifically selected for scientific purposes, but they also have, commercial, opportunities as well. But again, we reserve about 5% of the space station for those activities.
And for something like the face cream, are there any provisions that would say if that is the work that was done on the space station is then used in a commercial, that NASA would get some percentage of those costs? Or are they prohibited from using the information in an ad? Because it seems to me that using our tax dollars in that way to support a private company to benefit from the dollars of research is something that we ought to think about.
So yes, ma'am. And I don't know the details on the Estee Lauder mission, for example. I could certainly ask those questions, and I can get something back to you. I don't know the details on how it was selected, whether it went through the national labs or it might have gone through the Johnson Space Center specifically. I'm just not sure about that particular mission, but I'll look into it and get you the details.
Thank you. And as I said, I'm not aiming that necessarily at Estee Lauder, but just in general, how are we choosing the projects that we're looking at commercializing the low Earth orbit activities? And, is there a bidding process? How is the cost determined? The details around how this is being done.
Yes, ma'am. I can tell you that everything goes through a very competitively selected process, and that scientists are the ones that are making these decisions. So I will get back to you with those details.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Bridenstine, for being here. While many of us here today have focused on the Artemis program and our return to the moon, I'd like to go back a little bit further and talk about the Apollo program, our first mission to the moon. Every NASA mission relies on a team of scientists, engineers, and others to design, manufacture, and verify that these spacecraft can indeed reach their intended target. You can't just point a rocket into the sky and light a fuse. You have to verify that your trajectory reaches your destination and validate through complex calculations that it will work. In the 1960s, those were done by hand, and for our most important flights, it was Katherine Johnson, a West Virginia native, that did those. Today, we use software to make those calculations. NASA's independent verification and validation facility in Fairmont, West Virginia, bears her name and proudly carries on the tradition by ensuring that this software is safe, reliable, and can be trusted to ensure our missions are completed and get home safely. And I'm pleased that you have committed to utilizing IV&V for our return to the moon. However, this is an incredibly complex, expensive mission, and yet IV&V's total budget is just $39 million for next year. Just like its namesake, Katherine Johnson once validated IBM's work on the Apollo program, it is critical that IV&V has the funding to maintain its independent analysis of these programs. So can you commit to providing the funding and workforce necessary for the IV and the V to do the critical job and ensure that we return safely to the moon?
Yes, sir. The Katherine Johnson IV&V facility in West Virginia is absolutely critically important to NASA's mission, and it's necessary to keep our astronauts safe.
The budget process. Do you feel confident you'll have the necessary budget to do it? Yes,
sir. I do. I think the IV&V facility is well resourced now, and of course, the budget request that we have before the House and the Senate, I think, is a strong budget request for the requirements that we have for the Orion crew capsule, for example.
Do you remember that? What is that amount that you're asking for there?
I think you said it was in the $39 million range.
39.1.
39.1.
Uh-huh. Okay. Located just down the road from the Katherine Johnson's IV&V facility, the West Virginia Robotics Technology Center has been the lead academic partner for NASA's Restore-L satellite servicing mission since 2009. Last year, NASA made a decision to combine the Restore-L satellite servicing mission with a space infrastructure Dexterous robot Spider, which will demonstrate manufacturing assembly of a communications antenna in space. Both of these programs will be launched on board the On-Orbit Servicing Assembly and Manufacturing OSAM-1 spacecraft. I applaud NASA and its industry partners like Maxar for thinking outside the box to achieve cost savings and ensure these critical programs move forward. NASA's goal of returning to the moon and beyond will require the continued development of robotics technology like this and a workforce to support these endeavors. Can you tell me how that program is progressing?
Yes, sir. So the OSAM mission, a number of the instruments and robotics have gone through critical design review. Others are still in front of us, but that overall mission is progressing very well. We're very grateful to the West Virginia Robotic Institute. We're also very grateful to the Goddard Space Flight Center for the great work being done on the OSAM mission. I will tell you that our goal as an agency is to not only be able to do this as a technology demonstrator, but we see a day in the future where satellites in low Earth orbit and even geostationary orbit eventually can not only be serviced but maintained. So refueled, and of course maintenance can be done robotically. That future, of course, right now it's NASA developing the capabilities and the technologies, but the future that we see is that those technologies will be commercialized. And we could see a day in the future where there would be dozens of satellites in low Earth orbit, operated by numerous companies that are with a profit motive ultimately to service and do maintenance on satellites in orbit, which would be a huge cost benefit to satellite operators and even prevent orbital debris from, when these satellites come to the end of their lives, they become orbital debris in many cases. So
was the current budget, your current budget of $227 million, is that going to be sufficient to launch on track for 2023?
I believe it is, sir. It is. We are committed to that mission, as you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the ranking member. I know she had to leave as well. And to Administrator Bridenstine, it's great to see you again.
Always.
And this hearing is obviously an opportunity to compare notes on priorities. And as you know, and thank you for mentioning NASA Goddard, we're proud to have them in the state of Maryland, along with the Wallops facility, which of course straddles the Virginia-Maryland line, as well as Johns Hopkins, APL, the Space Telescope, and other things. So we consider ourselves a very active state when it comes to space exploration and the earth sciences, obviously also home to NOAA. So in the last couple of years, I pointed out what you know, which is that you're not ultimately responsible for the budget that comes to us from the Office of Management and Budget, but I want to reaffirm with you the merits of some of the programs, and then with the chairman and the ranking member of this committee, we'll make decisions with respect to our priorities. And in the last 2 years, when you've come before the committee for this hearing, I've asked you about the importance you place with respect to the guidance of the decadal survey.
Yes, sir.
And as you've said in the past, it's very important that NASA be guided by the recommendations of that decadal survey. That's what you said for the last 2 years. I want to confirm that that remains the case. Does it?
Absolutely, 100%.
And one of the programs, in fact, the program that was ranked #1 by the 2010 decadal survey with respect to astronomy and astrophysics was the WFIRST program, recently renamed the Roman Telescope. It had the highest scientific priority space astrophysics mission rating. Mr. Administrator, would you agree that that remains an important priority for our country?
I do.
Thank you. And I know, because you and I have talked about so many of the important aspects of NASA, but would you agree that if we don't move forward with this mission, it will lead to long-term costs for the project in the future?
It absolutely will. The longer a program goes, the more it costs.
And we would lose important knowledge of the decadal survey to prioritize our understanding. Is that right?
I think that's true. I would also add, just as a point of reflection, that the WFIRST is really a complement to the James Webb Space Telescope. And so obviously we have had some delays with the James Webb Space Telescope, although we now have that on track for an October launch of next year. And that's moving along very well, even in the midst of the COVID crisis. So I do believe the WFIRST is important to the nation. I believe it's a mission that is obviously not just important in my view, but also the national academies who put together the decadal survey. So yes, we are committed to that mission, and as it has been appropriated, we are building it right now. In fact, we're past critical design review. In fact, I think it was February of this year, we did the critical design review, and now it is in fact being built. So
no, I appreciate that. And as I'm sure you know, GAO came out with its assessments of major projects and talked about the progress
yes,
being made. So we compliment you on those advances. The PACE program and Clario programs have also been mentioned and referred to in the decadal surveys, and I just want to reaffirm with you now the importance of those projects to our scientific endeavor.
yeah, both of those are important. Understanding oceans helps us, understand, how our climate is changing, and that's what PACE is all about. And of course, Clario Pathfinder, that's basically a radiation instrument, so we know how much energy is coming from the sun and how much is being absorbed by the Earth compared to how much is being reflected back out to space, and that's a mission that's going to really help us understand the climate change that we are seeing. So both of those missions are important to our understanding of the Earth, which is why they were a high priority in the decadal survey.
Got it. And finally, and you discussed this a little bit with Senator Manchin and may have with other members, the Restore L program, I know you see as essential robotics servicing capability as we go forward. And again, that you have 100% commitment to go forward with that. Is that right?
We are, in fact, going forward very rapidly with that. The first mission, we're going to service a Landsat 7 satellite, which is operated by USGS, and then we're going to move forward from there. But all of those technologies are hugely important for the nation because ultimately, if we can service satellites in orbit, it drives down costs, it enables us to do more than we could otherwise do, and at the same time, it prevents the orbital debris challenges that we're seeing. A lot of people saw even last night, we had to maneuver the International Space Station. That's the third time in 2020 we have had to maneuver the International Space Station, and the last time we had to maneuver it was 2015. The orbital debris problem is getting worse, and I think OSAM is going to be very helpful in mitigating that challenge.
I appreciate it. I have some additional questions for the record, but that's all for now. Right now, thank you again, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's reassure me or highlight for me the challenges you face, NASA faces, in meeting that 2024 mission to the moon. What are the benchmarks that you need to see accomplished today, or let me start earlier. In the past, where are the check marks that say we've accomplished this, it allows us to proceed, and we're on track? What are the benchmarks we should be watching to see if you're able to meet that would give greater assurance that 2024 is a realistic option?
It's a great question. So right now we are doing the green run test on the SLS rocket, which is the only rocket that has any chance of being able to take our astronauts to the moon by 2024. That green run test, we have completed 5 of the 8 tests. In November, we intend to actually fire the rockets, all 4 RS-25 rockets at the same time for the green run test down at the Stennis Space Center. That is a big, big milestone. Once that is accomplished, that rocket is going to be moved to the Kennedy Space Center to be assembled with the solid rocket boosters, which have already been delivered, and with the Orion crew capsule and the European service module. It will be stacked down at Kennedy for a launch in November of 2021. So meeting the green run test and then a launch in November of 2021 for Artemis 1, which is uncrewed, orbit around the moon, those I think are key milestones. So that's on the rocket side. Now, if we're able to achieve that, we will be on track for Artemis 2 in 2023. If that Artemis 1 mission pushes too far from the end of 2021, it starts to encroach on Artemis 2, which would happen in 2023. And then it creates a crescendo where once one starts getting pushed, the others start getting pushed. So we got to make sure that we stay on track there. I would also say the other big challenge for us is the human landing system. Now, I would say this is the biggest risk because this is a brand new human landing system. We have not built a human landing system since 1972. And now we're doing it again for the first time. Right now, we have a human landing system funded for the first time since 1972. That has not happened since 1972. It's not happened in my lifetime, which puts it in perspective, and I'm 45 years old. So I think getting that human landing system funded was a huge step. We got that last year. We're currently funded at $600 million. The House Appropriations Committee passed their own appropriation bill that had $600 million for that human landing system, which we are very grateful for, and that's for 2021. We're very grateful for that. I want to be clear. I will also tell you that that's not enough to achieve the 2024 moon landing. I'm glad that they did it. It shows strong bipartisan support that we all agree we need to go to the moon. But again, the longer the program goes, the more I worry that it becomes at risk. So accelerating it to 2024 requires a $3.2 billion budget for 2021 for the human landing system, which is in the President's budget request. So anything this committee can do to help us get those resources is critically important. Now, I will also say that even right now, as we go through this first period with the human landing system, we have 3 companies under contract. That's that's a good milestone, and they're all meeting their objective, which is, we want to be able to, in this first phase, we want to be able to, by February of next year, declare which of the 3 we're going to go forward with. And depending on what they come back with as far as their proposals, we might select 2. We might even keep 3 in the game. It just depends on what they come back with. So we're anxiously anticipating how the companies propose, what their solution set is to get to the moon. But we are doing this differently than we've ever done it before. We're doing it commercially. So we are giving them a lot of leeway. We are not being prescriptive. We're giving them freedom to create solutions that are going to be in their interests that go even beyond NASA. So for commercial activities, for example, on the surface of the moon. I guess the big thing is SLS rocket needs to be complete, and then the human landing system. We've got to get it funded, and then we've got to make sure we're meeting our milestones. But as of right now, we're meeting all the milestones necessary to achieve a 2024 moon landing.
Would you attach dates or years to points? Would you attach points in time to those 2 events? By when do each need to happen?
Yeah, so we need to, as an agency, we need to select the human landing system by February of 2021. And again, depending on what their proposals are, their proposals will have milestones that we will be able to measure them against. And we will be tracking those very, very diligently, and even providing our own feedback as to what we think those milestones should be as well. So it's a true public-private partnership. So we'll be looking for those milestones come February of next year on the human landing system. But as far as the SLS rocket, by November of 2021, we need to have Artemis 1 launched, and then we need to be prepared for Artemis 2 by 2023. And those are the 2 big milestones.
For this mission to be successful, to meet its goal of 2024, does NASA have the personnel and the leadership now in place? There's been some changes at NASA in the last year. The leadership now is in place. You would expect to be able to necessary to meet the goals?
Yes, sir. I will tell you, Kathy Leaders is now the head of Human Exploration and Operations. That is the mission directorate responsible for getting our first woman and next man to the South Pole of the Moon by 2024. She has run 2 very successful programs. The first one being commercial resupply of the International Space Station, and now commercial crew of the International Space Station. And because of her, monumental efforts and achievement, we have placed her in charge of the entire mission directorate to achieve this objective.
Administrator, you said something that caught my attention about the potential. I mean, we have three teams that are competing for the landers, really for the business to utilize their plan, their equipment to land on the moon. The competition is still ongoing. I understand that. The way I understood it was that the 3 would be narrowed to 2 and ultimately narrowed to 1. You indicated you might keep the 3 in longer, if I understood you correctly. Is there any thought that you can go from 3 to 1 and skip the second expense of 2 in competition?
Yes, sir. There are discussions about this. What we need to see is at the end of this, what we call the base period, which ends in February of 2021, we need to look at how robust their proposals are and what they are suggesting in terms of dollars. Some of these providers are investing a lot of their own money, so we really don't know what they were going to necessarily put forward for NASA to fund and what they're going to do in a public-private partnership. So it's premature to say, sir, I think at this point, whether it's going to be 3 or 2 or 1. I will tell you, and this is a concern to me, I worry about going down to 1. And I'll tell you why. because when you eliminate the competition, you end up with programs that inevitably get dragged out, and you end up with cost overruns and schedule delays. And I can give you lots of, I'm not going to dime anybody out right now, but I can give you lots of examples where that's the case, both at NASA, the Department of Defense, and other places. But if we're going to the moon commercially and we keep 2 providers in the mix, what happens is there ends up being this virtuous cycle where they're making their own investments, they're committing their own resources to achieve the goal that is the goal of the United States of America. And I think that's a positive development that's good for the American taxpayer. And we've seen the success of that with the Commercial Crew Program, which was a fraction of the cost of the Space Shuttle program, for example.
Is an uncrewed flight demonstration a requirement before sending a crew to the moon?
It is not necessarily a requirement, but of course, when NASA evaluates proposals, we will be looking for, what are they doing to retire risk and the processes and procedures that they have. I will tell you, I don't want to say what's in the proposals or anything, but there's a lot of interest. I'll just say that. There's a lot of interest in making sure that there is a precursor mission that is uncrewed.
There's been, over the history of NASA, a lot of mission delays. I mean, we've seen GAO reports that are regularly published on NASA's projects that show major delays in missions across the agency. What is NASA doing now to reduce the likelihood of that being an occurrence during the Artemis program?
So right now, I mean, if we look at how NASA is dealing with COVID, we have prioritized missions based on whether or not they are mission essential or mission critical. Mission essential functions are things that are high priority for the nation, and those functions have been going forward. We saw that with Commercial Crew. We saw that with Mars Perseverance, and of course we're seeing that with the Green Run test right now on the SLS rocket. It is also true that in any program that NASA does, we always make sure that we have reserves. The reserves being both in schedule and cost, because when we do things for the first time ever, and we always learn what we don't know in the process of development and then testing. So we do have reserves, and I will tell you with COVID, those reserves on all of our programs are being eaten up because people just don't have access to facilities. We have suppliers that aren't going to work. We have suppliers that are very strained financially. And so these things have an effect. As of right now, I will tell you the reserves are being eaten up rapidly for pretty much all of our programs. On the Artemis program, most of that work is mission essential, and so it has continued to go forward. We are making sure that everybody has their personal protective equipment, that we're keeping social distancing, we're keeping our people safe. We have also said that if people don't feel safe going to work, they ought not go to work. Everybody's circumstances are different. People have different medical conditions, different conditions at home. People have, mother-in-laws that live with them, for example. I say that because I have a mother-in-law that lives with me, and she's got multiple sclerosis, for example. So she's not somebody that we can risk getting COVID. So different families have different circumstances. We want to make sure we get the right people on the right projects, people that we can protect by having them not involved in the project. We protect. And we've been very successful in keeping our people safe on these mission essential functions, and we will continue to do that for the Artemis program.
Let me run through a couple of items somewhat quickly, but they're important. What should Americans know the value to them of going to the moon, returning to the moon? And let me start by saying, what scientific advancements related to the moon would you see occurring as a result of being back on the moon?
Oh, there's so much. First of all, we discovered in 2009 that there's hundreds of millions of tons of water ice on the south pole of the moon, and a lot on the north pole of the moon as well. So there are things happening at the moon that we don't understand. We just a couple of weeks ago we discovered rust on the moon, which means there's oxygen there, if you can imagine that. So now we're doing scientific experiments to understand how is the oxygen getting to the moon, because it's not being originated at the moon. Maybe it's coming from the Earth, and now we're learning new things about whether or not oxygen from the Earth is actually getting to the moon. Those are little things, but when we think about heliophysics, for example, the study of the sun, the moon represents a body in space that doesn't have an atmosphere, it doesn't have a hydrosphere, it doesn't have an active geology. So anything that impacted the moon billions of years ago is today right where it was billions of years ago. That includes subatomic charged particles that have been coming from the sun. It includes asteroids from deep space. And of course, we see all of the pot marks on the moon. Those pot marks are there specifically because it doesn't have an atmosphere that eats up those asteroids when they come in contact with the moon. Our atmosphere eats them up, and when they do hit the Earth, because of its active geology, it chews them up, and we have an active hydrosphere. And so when we find those metals, we call them rare earth metals. They're very trace. But there could be large deposits on the moon that would give us a lot of knowledge and information about our own solar system. I would also say, imagine an orbiter around the moon that can not only see the first light in the universe after the Big Bang, but could actually see back into the dark ages after the Big Bang and before first light occurs. From the far side of the moon, it is so quiet from an electromagnetic spectrum perspective that we're going to be able to see and make assessments as to the physics of the early universe, which of course is going to transform how we think about energy, for example. And so these are missions that I think are critically important for science. On the far side of the moon, we can put very simple wire antennas that will pick up very low frequency signals that back in the early universe, those very low frequency signals would have been light. But as the universe has expanded, those waves have expanded as well, and now we can pick them up as radio frequencies. So again, we can see and make assessments as to the early universe. Also on the moon, we could put optics. So we could actually detect from the moon planets orbiting other stars in a way that we can't do from the Earth, and we can't do it from a free-flying satellite. But we can do it from the moon because it's so stable. Imagine having the most stable satellite in the history of satellites ever. Well, it's a natural satellite. It's called the moon. And we can put optics on the moon and see tiny little flickers of a star that are routine and make assessments as to whether or not that's a planet. And once we know that there are planets around these other stars, which at this point we've discovered something like 9,000 planets around other stars, and all of these are new discoveries. Now we're going to have the James Webb Space Telescope. We can train it on those planets specifically. We can see the light coming from those stars through the atmospheres of those planets, and we can make assessments as to whether or not those planets have life. And we could even make assessments as to whether or not those planets have industrialized life, if you can imagine that. I'm not suggesting that exists. I don't have any idea. But it's just fascinating to think about. We're going to be able to see those things, and the moon is a critical piece of that. And so it's about heliophysics, the study of the sun, because the regolith represents those impacts of subatomic charged particles. It's about astrophysics, the study of deep space. It's about planetary science, because when we go to the moon, we're learning how to live and work on another world so that we can go to Mars. And of course, it's about earth science. We're making new discoveries all the time. We just, Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen, who runs the Science Mission Directorate at NASA, ordered the opening of Apollo samples that we've had preserved now in a vacuum for 50 years. And he wanted to open those samples because now we have new technology to assess those samples. And from that assessment, we are able to see how the Earth and the Moon formed. Did we form together and then separate? Did we form separately? And now we're understanding that in fact we actually we're obviously part of the same system, and we were formed about the same time. So these are fascinating discoveries. It's because of the moon. And now when we go to the moon, unlike the 1960s and 1970s, we have so much more technology that we can apply to what we discover, and it's going to revolutionize our understanding of the universe.
Administrator, I was trying to decide whether I needed to cut you off.
Sure.
Based upon your enthusiasm and the long list of things that can be accomplished scientifically with a visit to the moon. What could I tell universities in my state that they might be able to do to participate in this mission?
So we love it when universities get involved in these missions for a number of reasons. When a university, for example, puts together a science instrument, the researcher, the scientist, for example, and the engineer are together, and they make trades early in the process. And so when we give them a schedule and a budget, the scientist and the engineer get to work. And when the engineer says, hey, this is going to cost this much, what if we did this? And they're sitting there with the scientist, and the scientist can make a determination quickly as to whether or not the new solution is going to work for the science that they're trying to achieve. It helps us as an agency keep projects on budget and on schedule, and it works like magic. Even better with the university, we get the students involved, and those students, whether they're graduate students, undergraduate students, they get hands-on experience. They graduate not just with chemistry, calculus, and physics, but they're graduating with hands-on experience building satellites and robots for NASA so that they can get to work right away in the workforce. So I would say if we look at in the next, as we look at going to the moon specifically, we're going to have missions on every single one of those Artemis missions. Some of those missions are going to be CubeSats that are going to maybe remain in orbit around the moon. Some of them might go off into deep space. That's for Artemis 1, 2, and 3. So universities can maybe participate there and make proposals on Artemis 2 and 3, for example, in the near future. Artemis 1, we've got 13 satellites already committed with universities from across the country. We think about when we go for Artemis 3, when we land on the surface of the moon, we're actually going to have science on the surface of the moon for the first time since 1972. So there's opportunities there. The Gateway, tremendous opportunity for science. We just recently announced that we're gonna have the Hermes mission on the Gateway, which is a heliophysics capability. That Hermes mission has a lot of researchers from universities across the country. So look, the best thing for a university to do is go to the NASA website and look for solicitations and then make proposals for this particular project. I will also tell you, and you know this, Senator, Wichita State University is critically important to NASA's mission, and that's true in aeronautics. The aeronautics industry right now has been devastated. We've had the MAX 8 issue. We've now had the COVID issue. We need to be making the investments into the aeronautics industry in a way that makes sure that when we come out of COVID, we remain the world's leader in exports in aeronautics. That means we need to have the resources for new designs of aircraft, a truss-braced wing for higher aspect ratio wings, for example, to get us more efficient aerodynamics. We need smaller core engines to get higher bypass and more fuel efficiency. We need advanced composites, high-rate composites. There's no place better than Wichita to work on high-rate composite manufacturing, and we've had a number of partnerships with Wichita State University, and now we're starting a new high-rate composite program, and I would imagine Wichita State University is going to be part of that consortium yet again. So I think there's no shortage of opportunities for universities. We love their involvement. We need their involvement. And of course, the best thing to do is, figure out what are the niche areas that the university has competencies, and then how do we apply those to NASA's missions, and let's get them involved.
Thank you for that answer. You did participate in a panel with academia and industry at Wichita State last summer, and I very much appreciate that. One of the things that panel was charged with discussing is how interconnected national security and space have become, and anything we should know about the capabilities or the enhancement of our national well-being, our national security well-being that comes from space, particularly the Artemis program.
Absolutely. So a couple of things that are important to note. Number one, the United States of America has amazing international partners. So when we think about the tools of national power, in the military we talk about DIME, diplomatic power, information power, military power, and economic power. NASA plays on the diplomatic side very strongly. 15 partners on the International Space Station, 19 different astronauts astronauts from 19 different countries have flown on the International Space Station. Experiments from 103 different countries. We currently have over 700 active agreements with countries all around the world for experiments, not just on the International Space Station, but into deep space with science and other capabilities. So it's a tool of diplomacy. As far as a tool of information power, there is going to come a day when humans land on the moon again. That day is going to happen. The question is, will it be the United States of America leading a coalition of international partners, or will it be somebody else? And in my view, it ought to be the United States of America that leads that coalition. We think back to the Apollo era when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon. Everybody on the planet saw it, and it was a magnificent moment to demonstrate America's political and economic system was superior to that of the Soviet Union at the time. And I think so those tools of information power and demonstrating the strength of the United States of America are very strong. And of course, on the economic side, we're constantly building the American economy, and all of our activities on the International Space Station and commercial efforts have demonstrated. For example, we had 0% of the commercial launch market in 2012, 0. And today we've got over 70%. And it's because of investments made by NASA into our commercial resupply and commercial crew partners. And that percentage is going to grow as time goes on. So I think we play in all of these spheres of national power. We're not a military organization, but diplomacy, information, and economic power, we play very strongly there.
Administrator, thank you. It's a good thing you did speak so long. Otherwise, we'd not be able to hear the questions from Senator Bozeman.
Yes, sir.
We would have concluded before he arrived.
Thank you, and I apologize for being late. Here I am in Senator Shelby's place. So, exactly. But anyway, we appreciate you. Thanks for all the great work that you do, and and again, those of you that work with you, the tremendous, your organization is something that our country is very, very proud of and has been for many, many years, and you have adhered to that great tradition and moving us forward. So I'm going to ask you something about, again, I apologize for being late, but I'm going to ask you about something that's probably already been mentioned, but it really is important. So Arkansas Space Grant Consortium continues to lead the way on educating undergraduate and graduate students on aerospace fundamentals, research, opportunities offered by NASA, aerospace industry, and the list goes on and on. Additionally, they familiarize and motivate K through 12 students with STEM-related courses. This has been a huge, thing that Governor Hutchinson is doing and doing in a very, very good way, so that we can get people into aerospace programs and related industry. With critical funding from NASA, this association produces the next generation of scientists and has really worked well. Engineers, educators, astronauts that the country needs to continue to keep us ahead of the rest of the world. So once again, this year's budget request proposes eliminating NASA's Office of STEM Engagement and Space Grant, EPSCoR, and other funding programs. This would put an end to organizations like Arkansas Space Grant Consortium, which would hurt educators and students from all walks of life who have a passion for space and strive to one day work in the aerospace industry and for NASA. So I guess, in your testimony on this issue, it was kind of a little bit brief, a little bit vague on how NASA would continue to create opportunities for those students, in withdrawing. Additionally, in fiscal year 21 budget, it mentions that NASA will continue to support internships, fellowships, and the administration's STEM priorities, but doesn't say how that's going to be represented. So I guess my question is, how will your agency continue to support and fund programs like Arkansas Space Consortium and students without the Office of STEM Engagement and its funding? And I've had the opportunity to get to know you through the years with your service in the House and now through in working with you with the great job you're doing. Being from Oklahoma, very similar states, very similar challenges.
Number one, the OSTEM office at NASA is doing amazing work. I can say that with a very clear conscience. I can also tell you that a lot of that work, EPSCoR and other contracts, I've seen the fruits of that work at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, for example.
Yes.
I was just there not too long ago, and they have this amazing capability at the University of Arkansas to replicate the atmospheres of planets, which is fascinating. And of course, that is because NASA has made investments through EPSCoR and other processes. And the researchers there, it's great talking to the researchers there because they're students. They're the students that are actually benefiting from this laboratory where they replicate the atmospheres of other planets and then determine, what could we do on that planet when we land there. So I think it's really great work there at the University of Arkansas. But I will also say, the way we see it is we want to align the mission directorates specifically to, the missions that NASA has specifically to the educational initiatives. And if we can do that, I think it would be even more beneficial. I gave an example earlier about FIRST Robotics, which is an amazing capability where young people get involved in building robots for competitions. And NASA, through the Science Mission Directorate, funds that to the tune of about $4.5 million every year. And the reason the Science Mission Directorate does that is because they need people that can build robots. And if you go to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory out in Pasadena, California, or other NASA centers where they are involved in robotics, you will often find those engineers were involved in FIRST Robotics when they were in high school or even before. So there are ways for us to invest in that education STEM effort that aren't necessarily from the Office of STEM Engagement. I can tell you this, if the Senate appropriates and the House appropriates those resources, we will continue to use them as we have, and they do provide fruits that are very valuable to the agency. So with that, I'll leave it there. But we are committed to STEM engagement.
No, we appreciate that, and again, I know it's been discussed, and anytime anyone is around you from the committee, it's going to be discussed at length, and so we appreciate you going over it again. Very quickly, with your permission, Mr. Chairman. Great. I'll take advantage of that then. Tell us, we've asked you a lot of questions and, shared our concerns. What is your concern with the agency? What do we need to be doing to help you? I know you've got your budget and things like that, not necessarily, certainly from a money standpoint, but also just, how can we provide the support that you need to continue, us supporting this great agency that I think we can
that has me very concerned. And that is that a day is coming when the International Space Station comes to the end of its useful life.
Okay.
And in order to be able to have the United States of America have a presence in low Earth orbit, we have to be prepared for what comes next. We have requested in the budget request $150 million for low Earth orbit commercialization. So we have built commercial resupply to resupply the International Space Station, where we buy a service from commercial companies. Those commercial companies go get customers that are not NASA, and that drives down our costs. We've done that with Commercial Crew now, which has now been successful. The next big thing is we want to see a public-private partnership where NASA can team with commercial space station providers so that we can keep a permanent, uninterrupted human presence in low Earth orbit. I don't think it's in the interest of the nation to build another international space station. I do think it's in the interest of the nation to support commercial industry where NASA is a customer, as we can then stay in low Earth orbit and then go on to the moon with the resources that we need to get to the moon. But I do have a concern. China is rapidly building what they call the Chinese International Space Station. And they're rapidly marketing that space station to all of our international partners that we as a nation have invested in to build their capacities for space flight. And I think it would be a tragedy if after all of this time and all of this effort, we were to abandon low Earth orbit and cede that territory, which the value to low Earth orbit is microgravity, where we can compound pharmaceuticals and create immunizations for salmonella and pneumonia and other things. We can print human organs in 3D. We're proving that we can do that right now. You can't do that on the Earth. We can create artificial retinas for the human eyeball so people with macular degeneration don't have to lose their eyesight. But all of these are commercial efforts that are tremendously valuable to the future, but without NASA as a partner, commercial companies aren't going to invest. So we need to do those public-private partnerships to have commercial low Earth orbit, which will drive down our costs, and we can be a customer there, and then ultimately not cede that territory to another country that doesn't have our interests at heart.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Bozeman, thank you. Administrator, anything that you'd like to add, augment, correct?
Yes, I actually was corrected on one thing that I said earlier. I think Senator Moran asked me if Store L would be ready to launch in 2023, and I responded, yes, I believe so. I was just corrected. It is scheduled to launch in 2025, so I wanted to make sure that that was clarified.
Okay. Administrator, thank you. Anything else?
Oh, Senator Manchin. I'm sorry.
I knew the right name. Okay. If there's no further questions this afternoon, senators may submit additional questions for subcommittee's official hearing record. We would request that NASA respond to those questions within 30 days. And with that, the subcommittee stands in recess.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.